Hello, my name's Simon Turner and welcome to a tour of the mixing desk. Understanding signal flow is one of the key skills you need to get to grips with in audio engineering, whether it's as an interested amateur or a full-blown professional. How a signal flows from its source, the sound, to the recording medium and back out to your speakers is important. And it's just as important to get it right in a simple setup with just a mic and a sound card as it is in the largest studio or live situation. In Singing Canary's earlier tutorial, An Introduction to Recording, we covered the basics of how to get a signal from source to recorder. Here we'll look at the signal flow in relation to the use of consoles in a recording environment. We'll cover what consoles are and their use, the common features found on them, how to send signals to external devices such as effects units, and inserting inline processing, such as EQ and compression. We'll also take a look at the use of Patchbays and their benefits to all but the simplest setup. Next up is a tour of two different types of consoles, a large format 48-channel desk and the other a small format 16-channel mixer. The aim of this tutorial is to help you understand the basics of signal flow in any given situation, large or small, and to appreciate why you should get it right. Happy recording.
When working in the field of audio, whether in your home studio or a large commercial facility, you're likely to encounter a mixing console. Whether referred to as a mixing console, recording console, mixing desk, soundboard, or simply just a mixer, all refer to the same thing. For consistency, we'll use the term console throughout this tutorial. From recording studios to radio, television, PA, and film and post-production, consoles are used to amplify, attenuate, balance, route, combine, and control tone and dynamics of an audio signal. In the world of professional audio, consoles can be a crucial part of the process. They allow you to monitor multiple mic and line signals in one ergonomic solution. This tutorial will teach you about console signal flow and how to use a console to get the signal from your mic to your DAW, and from your DAW back to your console. There are two main sections of a mixing console, the channel strips and the center section, also known as the master section on smaller consoles. The channel strips are input channels of the console and are usually mono. Channel strips in their simplest form generally feature a mic pre or line trim. You can get basic EQ, sometimes as simple as a 2-band low and high frequency boost or cut, a left and right pan pot, solos, mutes, and a channel fader. Sometimes on smaller consoles, the fader is replaced by a pot to save cost and space. More complex and expensive designs may include extensive EQ and dynamics options, insert switches, subgroup busing, effect sends, and a meter bridge at the very top of the console. On the back of the console's channel input area, you can usually find an XLR socket for the mic pre's, line input jacks, insert send and return sockets, and sometimes a direct output. A console center section or master section is where you'll find the console's master controls. Controls such as the master fader, subgroup masters, monitor controls, and extra inputs for additional stereo sources such as CD players, iPods, DVD players, or reference mixes from your DAW. The master fader is the fader that controls the main output level of the console's mix bus. The subgroup outputs and their controls can also be found in the master section. Subgroups are used to merge various channels as an additional level control before the master fader. Typical use would be to group similar instruments to one fader once a balance has been achieved on the individual channel faders. A console would usually have some type of routing matrix or subgroup routing switches on each channel. On some consoles, the subgroups have dedicated outputs and can be used as a way to control and choose which channels are sent to your recording device. Another important part of a console is the monitor section. This is where the level of your monitors is controlled. You can also use this section to choose which source signal is feeding the input of your monitors. The monitor section usually includes headphone cue outputs as well. Auxiliary, or aux sends, split the incoming signal, allowing you to route to an auxiliary bus. This is for use with external processing devices. Aux sends are usually mono and can either be pre-fader or post-fader. The level of a pre-fader send is set by the aux send control. Post-fader sends also depend on the position of the channel fader. Aux sends are normally used to send signals to external processors such as delays and reverbs. These processors' outputs can either be returned back through another channel or dedicated effects returns on the console. External effects units normally receive a post-fader signal. When using effects sends as headphone cues, you would usually set the aux send to pre-fader in order to have an independent mix for the musicians. Some mixes have dedicated aux sends for the headphone cues. These are called cue sends and are normally stereo. Having stereo cue sends is beneficial because it allows you to further customize the artist's headphone mixes by allowing you to pan your signal left or right. Inserts are access points that are built into a console. They allow you to add line-level external processing devices to the console signal path. You can usually find insert points on each channel, mix bus, or subgroup channels. Insert points can be balanced or unbalanced. Some consoles use a single TRS insert point as a send and return. This type of connection is unbalanced due to the TRS jack having to share only 3 conductor points for both lines as opposed to 2 conductor points per line with a balanced jack. The TRS jack insert typically uses the tip as the send and the ring as the return. Some setups have the tip as the return and the ring as the send. High-end consoles generally have discrete inserts, send, and returns. This allows for balanced connections and can be supplied via D-sub connectors, XLRs, or jacks. Insert points are often normalized, which means the circuit allows signal to pass through the channel as normal without anything having to be patched into the send and return points. This normal mode of operation is interrupted when a jack plug is plugged into the insert socket. When your console has individual send and return sockets, the signal will only be interrupted by plugging a connector into the insert return. The insert send in this setup will still send a signal without interrupting the normal operation of the circuit. Although they can sometimes seem confusing, Patchbays are a really efficient and flexible way of connecting equipment in the studio. They are usually used to route signals between outboard equipment and mixing consoles, or these days direct to your DAW via hardware inserts. The idea behind the Patchbay is to allow you to access all of the input and output options in your studio in one location. This eliminates the need to crawl around the floor trying to get to the rear of your rack equipment. For smaller setups, a Patchbay may be overkill unless the equipment is permanently set up in an inconvenient location. Patchbays are set up to automatically send signals from the top row to the bottom row. Outputs should be set up on the top row and inputs on the bottom row. Patchbays can be configured in 4 different ways, depending on your studio equipment and workflow needs. And these 4 modes are normaled, half-normaled, parallel, and open. Changing the way a Patchbay is configured can be as simple as changing the switches on the top of the Patchbay if your unit comes with them, or breaking out the soldering iron if not. When a patch point is normaled, it means the signal entering the Patchbay is routed to the back output without need for a patch cable. This is useful for connecting regularly used equipment such as aux sends to effects units. The aux send can be interrupted by inserting a patch cable and routing the signal elsewhere. In a half-normaled mode, the Patchbay works the same as the normal mode but allows you to patch from the output without interrupting the signal flow. This allows you to try alternative routing. Both normaled and half-normaled modes are ideal for effects and aux sends. The parallel mode allows you to split the signal with the back input feeding both front patch points and the rear output. This allows you to split a single signal to multiple outputs. In an open mode of operation, the Patchbay will route any signal without the use of a patch cable. This mode is the best mode for insert units such as compressors, gates, and EQs. This is because it doesn't allow the units to feed back into themselves as the normaled and half-normaled modes would.
Alright, so here is our Patchbay, and we can use this to route signals around the console from channels to particular pieces of gear. You can send groups, you can, this is where we bus everything for our headphones, key gating. This is a very important part of our console. Now, for the demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to We're going to send our bass, which you can hear nice and dry there. We're going to send it through an Empirical Labs distressor, which is a very nice crunchy compressor. And so that's on channel 12, and we'll just patch that into our distressor on the bottom there, and then from the top back in to 12. Now, as soon as I plug that in, you can actually hear the compressor kicking in. And so that's sounding quite nice, and I've got my settings all preset there, so we don't have to waste time with that. But now what's quite cool about a patch bay is, say I wanted a little bit more from my bass, like I'm quite liking that, but I want to see what else I can get out of it. So what I'm going to do now is patch from the distressor into our purple MC77, and we're going to patch straight back into 12. Now that's sounding a bit nicer. Now that's just taking off a few more of the tops and really straightening up the compressor, straightening up the bass rather. You can hear it just pulling up a few more of the lows, and alright, so that's bypassed, unbypassed. And that sounds pretty cool. So we might use that for our bass. And what else is cool about a patch bay is that you can patch it pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre-recording, post-recording, and you can really have a lot of fun with the gear here as well. It's quite cool.
Hopefully, we now understand a little about the different elements that you'll encounter in Studio Signal Flow. As far as getting signals from the console into your workstation, or from your workstation back into the console, you can send your signal pre-fader. Remember, every channel has a direct output. In this particular setup, we have 48 channels, each with a direct output, and these go directly into 48 inputs on our workstation I/O. The way we control the recording levels going into the DAW is by setting the channel outputs or the direct outputs to be post-fader. This then allows us to ride the levels of the faders going into Pro Tools and making sure the recording level is not clipping or distorting. For our headphone system, we use 16 of the track buses. Remember, we have 24 track buses on this console. We're using 16 of those to feed our personal AV monitoring system, and this gives the artist control over what they hear during tracking. We can have a separate feed for the drummer, separate feed for the guitarist, separate feed for the bassist, and a separate feed for the vocalist, up to 16 mono or 8 stereo feeds. We usually route the headphone feeds from the DAW return channels, and we set the bus sends to pre-fader because by doing this, it allows us to change the fader levels without affecting the feed to the headphones. The way we achieve how much level we send to our headphone system is by using our effects sends to feed the track buses. Here I'll show you an example using effects 1. I'll assign effects 1 to the EFX track bus. So rather than sending to our effects output, it's now sending the signal via the track bus. What I'm also doing is sourcing the channel output to be the source for our effects 1 send. What we then have to do is make sure our channel output is routed as a pre-fader signal. And this is done by changing the position of our source using the source select switch. And you can see confirmation of this on the meter bridge. What you'd also have to do is select which one of our 16 track buses is assigned to FX1. I will now take you on a tour of a large format analog console, as well as a common small format analog console. Although we are used to the relatively simple operation of our DAWs, which can, in most cases, simplify the extensive signal routing that takes place in order to send a signal from one place to another, these signal flow principles could seem confusing to those who've started their music making in the box once confronted with an analog recording setup. In the analog domain, a signal has to pass through a lot of electronics, depending on the design and complexity of the circuits and the vision and goal of the manufacturer. The more complex designs tend to cost a lot of money, whether it be parts, labor, or the research and development that goes into the product. At the very top of the console, we have the meter bridge, and this is represented on the channel TFT screens. It contains the channel meters and channel routing information for 6 channels per TFT. Each screen also shows you the total recall channel settings. The meter bridge shows you peak meters for the console's channels. These can either be for analog levels or DAW levels, depending on which focus mode you're in. You also have dynamics metering with the expander gate on the left and compression on the right. Below the meters, you have the signal processing order for each channel. These also help show what processing is active on each channel. Next is the channel routing. This console has a choice of 3 mix buses: Mix A, Mix B, and Mix C. Via the TFT, you can see which channel each mix bus is routed to, and this is done via the center section. Also part of the routing section is the 24 track buses, giving you 24 possible destinations for your channel signal. These are also selected in the center section. Let's start with our channel input section. This provides 2 external inputs: a line level DAW return and microphone input. This input also accepts line level signals.
Alright, now as you can see here, we've got the signal coming in on 33 and we've got the return on 34. Now, I haven't got any gain staging going on yet, and as you can see, it's still quite a hot level, so I'm going to engage the pad and that'll drop it down. Now, as I pull up the gain, you can see we're getting a nice strong level coming in, and now that's sounding pretty good up there. I'm getting a nice strong return coming from my DAW as well, so I'm quite happy with that signal there.
48 volts of phantom power is activated via the center section. The mic input has 2 independent preamp stages with very different but complementary sonic qualities. The main preamp uses SSL's highly acclaimed super analog circuitry. This provides extremely low noise, extended bandwidth, with minimum signal coloration, providing a very clean sounding pre. The drive-in switch routes the input signal to a completely different preamp, featuring SSL's VHD circuitry. VHD stands for Variable Harmonic Drive, and allows you to choose between second order and third order harmonic distortion.
Alright, now we also have here the VHD control. Now, being an acoustic, I might want a bit more of a crunch to the signal, get a bit of distortion going on. And so we have here the drive-in switch. Now, when I engage this, you can hear a bit of a change in the sound, and that's adding in some second order harmonic distortion to our acoustic. And as you pull this around and we head up towards the third order, you can hear the signal changing. You can hear a bit more of a crunch in the top end of the acoustic. At the same time, this does pull up your level, so you may need to back off your gain a bit. Now, right around the top there, that's starting to get quite nice and crunchy. That could be too much depending on what the song is, but I quite like that. I'm going to keep that there.
Next is the 24 dB pad and a high impedance switch useful for DI in guitars and bass. Next is the channel trim pot. This gives you plus or minus 20 dB of gain control. This allows additional gain control before the rest of the channel's processing.
We also have here our trim pots. Now, you can use these to pull back or add more to the signal if you need. You can see that getting quieter as I pull it down, and nice and strong as I pull it up. But we've got some good gain going on, and we'll leave it there.
In this section, we also get a phase switch, and it flips the phase by 180 degrees.
Alright, now so what we have here is our electric guitar coming in on 32 and 33. And what we're going to do is check the phase between the mics. And so I've got my phase button here, and I'm just going to check the 57 and see what happens. Now, as you can hear, that's definitely out of phase there. So when we disengage the phase button, it should be fine. And so we've got a Shure 57 and a Royer 121 on our guitar cab, and they're actually sounding pretty sweet as they are without any phase buttons. Out of phase, phase on. There's a definite change there, so I'm quite happy with the phase button off.
Next is the filter to input option. This option reroutes your filter directly after the channel source. After the input section, we have our dynamics processes. At the top of the dynamics section is the ratio pot. When the ratio pot is fully to the left, the compressor is inactive. Turning the control clockwise increases compression ratio until it reaches a true limit mode in the fully clockwise position. Pressing the ratio pot changes the compressor to peak mode. As you can see, the PK LED lights up. This indicates that the peak mode has been selected. This replaces the soft knee characteristic of the compressor with a hard knee, and this provides alternative voicing for some instruments. Next, we'll talk about threshold. Whenever a signal exceeds the level set by this control, the compressor will start to act at the ratio set by the ratio pot. This control, in conjunction with the ratio control, provide an automatic gain makeup, so as you lower the threshold, the output gain is increased. This provides a consistent level while applying compression without the need for an output gain makeup pot. The release pot controls the time it takes the compressor to return back to normal gain settings once the signal has fallen below the compressor's threshold. This control also incorporates a push-push switch used to select a fast attack. This gives you a variation to the standard attack time.
Alright, so we're back on the acoustic, and what we're going to do here is we're going to put a compressor over the acoustic guitar before it reaches our DAW. Now, we have this dynamics in switch down here, and when I engage that, you can now use the compressor. Without it on, you're not doing anything. So we'll just pull up the ratio and our threshold. Now, as I pull up the threshold, you'll see that we get some yellow LED lights shining up here, and that's showing us how much gain reduction is going on the compressor here. I might just pull that around so we can get some good stuff going. Now that's hitting a bit hard. That's going for about 6 dB of gain reduction, even 10 at moments, so we'll pull back the ratio and the threshold as well. Now the idea here is that we just want to get a nice consistency over the acoustic, and any time that our musician hits a dull note or just isn't playing as strong as they could, then we're pulling it up. It's sounding good. It sounds nice. Now if we play off the release here and watch the LED light, what you can see is that the compressor is actually staying open for longer, and you'll see the LED staying on a lot more than what it was earlier. Look there. Now you can see here that it's just staying on consistently. If I pull back the release, you should see a bit. Yeah. So the compressor is closing a bit quicker than it was before, and that's sounding pretty good there. We might back off the threshold, and I'm quite happy with that.
The next section in the dynamics is the gate and expander. This gives you an option between gating or using a 2-to-1 expander, activated by pushing on the range pot. As you can see, it lights up to show the expansion option is active. The range pot determines the depth of expansion or gating. When turned fully anti-clockwise to 0, this section is inactive. When turned fully clockwise, an attenuation range of 40 dB can be obtained. The threshold pot allows you to set the level at which gating takes place. Next is the release and hold pot. This pot determines the recovery speed and is variable from 1 millisecond to 4 seconds. The release and hold pot also allows you to activate a fast attack. Beside the release pot, you have a hold switch. When the hold is active, the release time is set to 150 milliseconds, but the hold time is variable between 0 and 4 seconds by adjusting the release and hold pot. Each channel has a key input. This is used as an alternative trigger source for the dynamics section. And this is activated by pressing the key switch. If you'd like to hear what signal is coming into your key input, you activate the sidechain listen. The final switch in our dynamics section is the dynamics in. This simply activates or bypasses the dynamics section. This console gives you great visual feedback by showing the dynamics section is active on the meter bridge.
Alright, so we've got the compressor running on our acoustic, and in the breakdown section of the song we're going to need a bit of gating on the acoustic as well. So the green pots here are our gate. I'll just pull around my threshold, and as I pull up the range you'll see on the ppm here the green lights showing up. Now that's showing how much gain reduction is going on with the gate. And that might be a bit too much, so what we're going to do here is just pull back the range. Pull up the threshold. And we also have a fast attack button here, so if I push in my release hold pot, it will give us a fast attack, and you'll see the gate ppm lights lighting up just a bit faster than what they normally would if it was disengaged. You can see there, just for an example, you'll see a nice amount of reduction happening, all going quite quick, and you can hear it really biting on the acoustic. If I take that off, it's not as harsh. Just pull that back to where I'm happy. Alright, now that's working pretty good.
Following the dynamics, we have the filter and EQ section. At the very top, we have our filters, with a low frequency cut and a high frequency cut. The low frequency cut takes you from completely off when fully anti-clockwise, all the way up to 500 Hz when fully clockwise. The high cut filter is off when completely anti-clockwise and takes you all the way down to 3 kHz when fully clockwise. If you recall back to the beginning of this tutorial, when I mentioned our filter to input switch, this routes the filter section directly after you input. It basically allows you to separate the filter section from the rest of the EQ. An example of where this is handy is when you wish to roll off all the low end on a frequency before compression, but still allowing you to apply EQ after your compression. Next in our filter section is the to sidechain switch. This reroutes the filter to the sidechain of your dynamics, and this lets you roll off frequencies that you don't want triggering your dynamics. As an example, you could use this to heavily compress a kick drum. But what can happen with heavy compression is you'll start to squash the transients. By rolling off the low frequencies using the to sidechain option, you can roll off all the low end from the detector circuit of the compression, allowing it to only react to the lower frequencies or the higher frequencies depending which roll off you use. And this will allow some of that low end frequency back into your sound.
Alright, so below our dynamics section we have all the EQ. And like the dynamics, in order to hear your EQ, you need to turn it on. So when we press the EQ in button, now we can use our EQ section. And starting at the top here, we have our filters. And so I've got my low filter here, and so this is filtering off all the lows. Now as I turn that, you can hear what's being taken out of the signal. And so that's definitely too much. And so what we'll do is we'll just pull that back around. I'm thinking maybe 50 to 60 Hertz. We'll roll off around about there, just to reduce any rumble that's going on in the recording. Things like foot tapping, just rolls off any of that. We've also got your high filter here. We're starting to sound like a bit of a telephone there. But being an acoustic, it's quite a high frequency instrument, and so we're not going to use any of that today.
And now onto our EQ. Here we have a 4-band parametric EQ, based on SSL's classic black knob EQ, which was developed for the SSL 4000E console. At the very top of the EQ section, we have the G EQ switch. With this desk, you have the option of 2 different types of EQ curves, the E-series curves or the G-series curves. The E-series curves have more of an aggressive character, while the G-series is a bit more of a smooth sound. As you work your way down the channel strip, you start with the high-frequency section. This is a high-frequency shelving equalizer with a bell option. Next along is the high-mid frequency section. This gives you a gain, cut and boost, frequency selection, and a Q control. Below this is the low-mid frequency band. Similar to high-mid frequency band, we have gain, boost and cut, Q control, and frequency selection. Finally, we have our low frequency band, with your low frequency boost and cut, and frequency selection. Same as the high frequency, we have the option for a shelf or fixed Q bell curve. You may have noticed 3 switches in the middle of the EQ section. One is an EQ in switch, for activating or deactivating your EQ. Below the EQ in switch, you have your insert in switch. The insert in switch routes the channel signal via balance insert send and returns. This option is also controlled via the center section. In your DAW, this is similar to simply inserting a plugin on your channel. Just like on the console, the signal in a DAW insert is looped in line, sending the signal from the channel into the processor and back before the channel fader. Inserts are used in situations when you don't require a mix of a dry and wet signal. These are situations like applying EQ or compression. There are occasions when you might be utilizing parallel processing, where you require a blend between the unprocessed and processed signal, and this will be applied as a send effect.
All right, and so down here, I've got the next set of EQ. And so up here, we can use this as a shelf EQ, which is its default, or you can put it into a bell mode. And so this actually goes up to around 22 kilohertz, and so if you wanted to boost the air, then you can. You can hear that one going into play now as well. I'm not going to use any of that right now. Now, in an acoustic, sometimes you may find with the EQ, you can dig out any frequencies that you don't like. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this out and just start rolling around the frequencies in the mid-range. So this is between 200 hertz to 2K. And as I roll this around, we can listen out for frequencies that we may want to take out. So what there, it's actually starting to make it sound worse. So what we might want to do is take out some frequencies around that range. So if we pull that back to there, we've also got our Q here as well. So we can go for a really high Q, or we've got the low Q. So that's going to affect a lot more of the range around that frequency. Pull that back to here. We can check the EQ, see how much we're EQing by disengaging the button. So we've also got our low down here. Now same again, you've got your bell if you need it. Otherwise it's a shelf. So we might just push it a little bit into there. Now the acoustics are actually sounding pretty good as it comes into the chain, and so you can use the EQ either pre-DAW or post-DAW depending on how confident you are with your sound at the time. And so we might put that in just pre-DAW and run with it.
Following the EQ section is our channel output selection. The channel output is normally used to feed the DAW input. The default signal is a post-channel fader feed, but the source select is used to select alternative channel output feeds. These include a pre-channel fader feed, a channel input feed, or you can activate an EFX send. All this can be graphically viewed on our TFT screen on the meter bridge. We use the AFL switch to monitor the channel output source as you toggle through the options. This is done with the source select button. On our center section, we have a single button selection for the 4 channel output sources: input, pre-fade, post-fade, and EFX. Below our channel outputs is our channel sends, or the Q and effects output section. Each channel has 2 stereo and 4 mono sends that can be used for a number of different purposes. For example, headphone feeds or effects sends. The stereo cues can also be used as an additional line-level input for mixing. At the top of our Q and effects send section, we have a pan pot. This pan pot is for our stereo Q sends. Normally, the stereo Q sources are pre-channel fader signals, and these route to the Q buses on the console. This in turn can be picked up in the center section and used as a fallback source. You can select and toggle the source for your cues by holding down the source select, which is at the bottom of the effects send section. Then you press the green pot, which is the send pot for the cue. The options available are a post-channel fader send, the direct output, or an alternative input. The alt input tends to be the alternative input source not assigned to the main fader, and this basically allows the stereo cue to be used as an additional input. So, although we have a 48-channel console, by using the cues in the alt input mode, this gives us 96 inputs on mixdown. The second cue is set by pressing the Set EFX or QB pot, holding that down, and pressing the Q level pot. As you can see, the QB lights up, which indicates that that's now active as a send to QB. Using the Set EFX QB pot, you can also cycle through having this as a QB, setting it to EFX output, and you activate the send by pushing on the pot. The master controls for QA and QB buses can be found on the center section. Next, we have our effects sends. This console has 4 mono effects sends that are normally sourced post-channel fader. They may, however, be sourced from the channel output. This is achieved by holding down the source select button and pressing the relevant effects pot to toggle the selection on and off. You also have master controls for each of the effects buses in the center section. By using your Set EFX QB switch and pressing the effects send, activates the EFX routing option. And what this does is allow you to send a signal to your track buses via the auxiliaries. You can select what source signal is sent to the track buses by activating the channel output. This is the same as activating a send in your DAW to an aux track or aux bus. This is where you'd usually open your reverb or delay as an insert plugin. The auxiliary channel hosting the plugin handles level control for this effects return. On the console, the return of this can either be routed to a spare channel or to the dedicated effects or echo returns.
Alright, so under our EQ, we have here the effect sends. Now, we've got a Q send at the top here, which can be used for headphone sends, if you want to send a signal somewhere around the studio, to like a fallback monitor, etc. And then underneath here, you've got 4 effect sends. And so what we have here, we've got hard patched onto effects for a Broadcast EM7 effects unit. Now, I've just got a echo plate reverb setting preset on there. And so when I press this in, I can set up my send. And as I pull this around, you'll hear the reverb on the acoustic. Now, we could go overboard and really crank it, but all we're after right now is just a little taste to even things out, and it makes it quite airy, I think. It sounds really nice.
The next section is the channel pan section. This gives you the option for regular stereo panning between left and right, and also 5.1 panning with an LFE pot, front and rear pot, and a focus pot. The focus pot switches the signal between left, center, and right, or just left and right.
Below our effects sands, we have the panning section. Now, you can pan in 5.1. The console is set up for 5.1 if you need. And we have done a few 5.1 mixes on here. It sounds great. But the one we're going to be using today is our left and right. Now, obviously, you can pan this hard left or hard right. But being an acoustic, we're going to keep it in the center for now, just for monitoring purposes. And if we need, later on in the mix, maybe we'll just pan it off to the left or the right, depending on what else is around the instrument.
Below the channel pan section, we have our D-pots. As we already know, the SSL Duality functions as an analog console and a DAW controller. The D-pot section allows you to control your analog levels, pans, and solos at the same time as having control of your regular analog channels. In this section, you also have your digital scribble strip, and these show your Pro Tools channels if you're in DAW mode, but they can also show your analog channel names. And this can be accessed via the SSL Logitivity browser. And this is the software that allows you to name the channels and also gives you general session management. The final section of our channel strip is the channel fader section. At the top of the section, we have the select switch. This is for selecting your DAW channels if you're in the DAW focus mode. Below that, we have our solo and cut or mute buttons. Below the solo and cut, we have our traditional scribble strip, then the channel faders. The channel fader is a 100mm moving fader that can control either our analog levels or the DAW faders, and this is accessed via the center section using the DAW focus mode. The center section allows you to flip the D-pot source, which would be the DAW fader, with the channel fader. So when this is active, your analog fader will be accessed via the D-pot, and your DAW fader via the fader. This allows you to quickly flip and give you finer control using the fader instead of the pot. This is handy for writing automation smoothly. By the way, this is automation of the DAW, not the console's own automation. And via the center section again, we can flip back to our analog control. The various buttons you can see beside the channel fader are for the SSL console's built-in automation. At the bottom of the fader is the channel select button. This allows you to select one channel at a time, or via the center section, select multiple channels in order to change multiple parameters at the same time. You also have the VCA group assignment section. Assigning a channel fader to a VCA group, of which we have 8, is done by selecting the associated VCA in your center section after you've selected that particular channel. And as you can see, I've now assigned all these channels to VCA fader or the group fader number 8. So that was the SSL Duality channel strip, starting at the very top with the meter bridge, then looking at the channel input section, the mic pre, the dynamic section, which contain the compressor and expander gate, followed by the filter and EQ section. The auxiliary send section or the effects output section with the stereo cues, the pan section, and finally the fader section. Okay, now we're on to the Duality center section. The center section comprises of 4 main areas: the center section meter panel, audio master control functions, a TFT screen and panels dedicated to DAW control, automation controls, and DAW transport controls, and the group faders and master fader. To the right of this area, we also have a trackball for your DAW control. The first thing I'll show you in our center section is the VCA group faders and the master fader. As you can see, we have 8 VCA faders. As you can see, groups 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8. These are used to assign the channel faders to the grouping system, and as I showed you earlier in our channel section, you simply push your group fader up, select your channel, and whatever channel I select on the console will assign to that particular group. So as I move my group fader, you'll notice the channel fader move. Now at the moment, our group faders are operating in servo mode. Servo mode means as you move the group fader, the channel faders move. The Duality has two group fader modes, servo mode or VCA mode. In VCA mode, when you assign a channel fader to a group fader, the channel faders don't move.
Alright, so down here we have our grouping section. Now, like most DAWs, you can subgroup tracks together so that you get a greater control over what you're listening to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use group 1 to group our drums together. Now the idea is to push up your group, select your tracks. So on the SSL it's actually digitally done. And so I've selected 11 tracks. And all I'm going to do is press the group button here, and that'll assign them to group 1. So you can see the lights along here from our kick channel down to our kit. And so when I adjust the group here, you'll see them move. We'll set those in there. And we can also group things individually. So what I'm going to do is group our guitars. Now, as it turns out, I've got my acoustic guitar, my tambourine, and then some electrics. So I'm going to select my acoustic and put that onto group 2. And then I'm going to select my electrics one at a time. I've got some Atmos guitars there as well. That means that I can group these together without grouping the tambourine into my guitars group as well. There we are. Simple as that. Also, you could put the piano and the organ together as well. So that's all our piano and organ channels controlled as one.
Above each fader you have a solo and cut switch. And again, these solo and cuts will affect whatever channels are assigned to that group. Beside the VCA group faders, you have a master fader, and this master fader can be assigned to control mix bus A, mix bus B, or mix bus C. Just above the group faders is a jog and shuttle wheel. This can be set to shuttle or scrub, and above that we have the zoom selections, allowing you to zoom your tracks, zoom track height, or zoom in. They can also act as simple channel selection. Beside these you have your numeric keypad, and this is useful for DAW shortcuts as well as quickly selecting and assigning location points.
Alright, so another cool feature that a lot of consoles have these days is the scrub and shuttle wheel, and that's this guy here. And the idea of this one is to be able to scrub or shuttle through a track looking for clicks and pops that you may not be able to hear at full volume at normal speed. So what we're going to do is just shuttle through here. Now I'm actually having a bit of fun with this one. We've got a nice big Echo Boy on this steel slide here, and yeah, you got the Echo Boy on there, and we can really just hear the delays and all the effects and get to have a bit of fun with it, really. So it does have a normal purpose as well. And then scrub mode. Scrub mode's just as fun, and you actually use the wheel. Scroll through it like this. That's quite a bit of fun as well. Yeah. We also have the zoom selection tool here. Now, you can use this to increase the size of the region, so you can really zoom in and have a look at what's going on. Or if you do your left to right, you can zoom in to a particular piece.
Above the trackball, you find your communications section. This is where you assign talkback to your artist in the live room, as well as activating the listen option. So if you have a listen mic in the live room, in order to hear what the artist is saying without having them step right up to the microphone, you activate this via the listen option. And the listen mic can be patched in via the listen mic input on the Patchbay. The slate option sends your talkback to all the outputs on the desk. Above the communications section is the Channel Select section. The Channel Select section allows you to centrally apply processing options or routing options on the desk. You can either go through it one channel at a time, or you can select multiple channels at a time. For example, I could select a range of channels, send them to mix bus A, mix bus B or C, or assign any of the available 24 track buses. Above the Channel Select area, we have the bus routing, as well as the PAN modes. The bus routing section allows you to select what track buses the channel you have selected are assigned to. You can assign a channel to all 24 buses if you wish, or you can select it to go to a single bus. You also select which mix bus that channel or a range of channels are assigned to.
Alright, so with the center section, we can use this area here for all the bus routing around the console. So currently we have our drums just going out the main mix on mix A, which you can see on the channels up here. Now what we're going to do is send the drums further down the console using the bus routing to add in a bit of drum parallel compression. So what I'm going to do is select the drums, so that's 11 tracks from 1 to 11. And what we're going to do is take those off mix A and actually send them out buses 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now when we move down here, the next thing is to assign channels 27, 28, 29 and 30 to be bus inputs. Now that we're busing signal from the start of the console down to here, what we need to do is set these up to receive the buses. And so what we're going to do is take those off line input and change them to bus. So you'll see it change up on the TFT screen. And so there's our signal. And so what you're hearing at the moment is the dry signal of the drums coming from channels 1 to 11. And so that's buses 3 and 4. And as I pull up channels 29 and 30, they're receiving buses 5 and 6. And what I've got here is I've patched in a EMI TG1 compressor to use as my parallel compression, and so you'll hear the compressor kicking in. So I've panned those left and right, and you'll just adjust the parallel compression as you need, or you may have it running on something else, or you may even use the routing for headphones, etc.
With the headphone system in the studio, as I mentioned earlier in our channel section, if I wanted to assign channel 32 to channels 1 and 2 on our 16-channel monitoring system, I assign effects 1 to source its output from the channel output and send the signal via the track bus and select which track bus I want to go to. I can globally activate the effects to track option.
Alright, so now that we have our parallel compression running on the drums, we're going to send the drums to the headphones. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to send them out effects 1. Now the idea is that being a headphone send, we're going to make it pre-fader. So we just change that. And we also need to make these channels effects to track. So I'll just press that one in. And with our dry signal, we're going to send those out, the left on 1 and the right on 2. And same with the parallel compression, so that's 1 and 2. And what we need to do here is on effects 1 here, we need to turn this on to effects and turn effects 1 on, turn it up. You see the lights going on there. Crank it hard right. And now that signal will be going to the headphones. And so the drummer and the other musicians, they'll now be getting a stereo headphone send to the drums, and we've got the dry signal in there as well as the compressed.
Above the master fader, we have the main bus matrix. This is where you can select your master section to work as 5.1, or you can choose which mix bus your master fader is assigned to. So at the moment, it's assigned to mix bus A. I can choose to assign it to mix bus B or mix bus C. These operate as independent mix buses. As you can see, the fader changes when selecting each bus. This is a handy way of controlling multiple faders from one fader. Over here we have the to A option. This to A option allows you to send whatever's on mix bus B or mix bus C back into mix bus A. So mix bus A will always be your main mix bus, and mix buses B and C can feed into mix bus A. You also have different processing and routing options. This is also where you'd assign the central bus compressor, and you can activate whether it's in circuit or out of circuit. The central bus compressor also works as a 5.1 compressor, and you can assign it over the 3 mix buses. You can also choose to move it between mix bus A, mix bus B, and mix bus C. In this section, you can also assign the master insert to one of your available mix buses. The post option allows you to set your insert post the center section compressor. This is useful if you wanted to have an EQ over your master fader, but you wanted the EQ after the compressor. You'd simply select Insert to Post, and this will place your EQ after your compression, or pre-compression. If you're working on a mix and you wanted to send different instruments via their own bus and apply some bus processing on each bus, say parallel compression over drums, a good way to do this would be to send all of your drums to one of the mix buses, send your instrumentation to a different mix bus, in this case mix bus B, and over mix bus B you could apply either the bus compressor or an outboard compressor, and then you could send all your instrumentation to mix bus C and apply a different processor. Directly above the group faders is the transport section. Your transport section gives you your typical stop, play, record, and shuffle forwards and shuffle back. Directly above the transport we have our automation modes, giving you the option for trim, motos off, trim lock, snap, auto takeover, and offline trim. You also have automation end, revise, join, all replay, as well as cancel and discard options. Here's our monitor section. This section allows you to select between multiple monitors, Mini A or Mini B, or your main monitors with the lights off. You can choose a source for your headphones and whether to mute those. Underneath the center section there's a headphone jack, and that relates to this headphone option. You also have an alternative monitor source, which is for 5.1 or just alternative stereo source. You can choose your monitor source, whether it's external A or external B, or an external mix, or mix A. The sum option basically sums all your monitor sections so you can hear them at the same time. The monitor mode allows you to select whether to monitor in mono, stereo, apply a phase reverse, and a solo clear. If you have any channels soloed on your console, rather than going to each channel to find what soloed, you can quickly clear the solo in the center section. The solo button turns the monitor cut buttons into monitor solo buttons. The miscellaneous levels section allows you to set the level of your mini monitors, Mini A and Mini B, as a way to try and help you match the levels when you switch between monitors. You can set a headphone level, solo and front level, pre-fader level, AFL, and your dim level. Here you have the main monitor pot, and this is just a level control to turn your monitors up or down, along with the dim and cut option. Above here you have your monitor mutes, or your monitor solos, and again that changes depending on this mode here. So you can either mute those or solo them. So left and right, center, LFE, right rear speaker or left rear speaker. You have quite a few different external input sources on this monitor section. External A and external B, each giving you 5 different sources. External A sources allow 5.1 external inputs, and external B being stereo monitor sources. So whether you have an external CD player or CD recorder, this is how you get your sources into the monitor section. The AFL and PFL allow you to select level settings for those options. The monitor options allow you to activate monitor to inserts or calibrate your monitors, as well as calibrate the subwoofer if you have one attached to your system. The meters option allows you to choose how you want your channel meters and your center section meters to react. You can have them show your DAW meters, your analog section meters, or choose what your VUs show in your center section. So whether you want it to show the peak meters and whether you want the peaks to hold. And if you do have the peak hold on, you can also clear the peaks. Activating peak hold holds the peak infinitely, and you just get rid of this by hitting clear. Over here we have the stereo returns. These are used, as you can see by the labeling here in the studio, as returns from our effects units, and all this is also accessible via the Patchbay. It has 4 stereo returns. Each stereo return can be assigned to either mix bus A, B, or C. You can choose to have the effects return as a mono signal and also cut the left or right signals. And you can also listen to the AFL signal. Beside that, you have your level control, which controls the level of that effects section. If you're working in 5.1, you can choose, using the focus pot, to have this as a left and right or more center-based. You can also send your effects return via the fallback outputs, either fallback A or B. In this particular studio, fallback A is for our headphones and is also used for talkback. Fallback B is a live room fallback where we have a set of monitors mounted into our live room wall. And this is for talkback if the artist doesn't have headphones on or if they want to listen to a take without having to come into the control room. This is activated via fallback B. Above the bus routing section, we have our global channel options. This is where I can activate phantom power for my selected channel or channels. I can activate solo isolate. I can choose whether that channel input is the mic input or the line input or a bus input. This is used for internally busing signals, and that basically follows the track buses. In this section, we can change our processing order for each of the channels or for all of the channels at the same time. So you can choose to put your dynamics post EQ or your insert post EQ or your insert post dynamics or the filter to input option. Below that, we have the insert in and the EQ in. This is just a centrally selectable bypass option for your EQs or insert. Below that, we have the channel output. This is where you can choose where you'd like your channel output to go, whether it's directly after your input section, so right after the mic pre. Remembering that we usually in this setup have direct outputs from each channel, feeding the 48 inputs on our DAW. By selecting the channel output to input, as soon as the signal comes into the mic pre, it's then going to feed the output directly back to Pro Tools and bypass any of the processing on the desk. So if you just wanted to use the preamp and nothing else, you'd select this option. Pre-fader allows you to send the channel output before the fader section. So that also means before the solos and cuts. This option is useful for the monitor returns, allowing you to play with your cuts, solos, and faders without affecting what the artist hears in the live room. The EFX option allows you to use your effects sends to feed the channel output, and this is useful for sending a signal elsewhere via an effects send, and gives you a level control via the effects send for the output. Next, we have the channel meters. The channel meter option simply switches between what the meters on your meter bridge show, whether it's the input, the monitor return, the post-fade signal, or the channel output. It's a good way of checking that a signal is going to a certain place. Above the TFT screen, we have the oscillator and talkback master controls. The oscillator section is used mainly for calibration, and you use it to send pink noise at varying frequencies to either the mix outputs, track buses, or your channel outputs. This is the level control, and this is the frequency selection. You also have a master for your listen mic, your talkback output, the level of the talkback to your fallbacks. In this case, it's going to fallback A, and the slate level. Below the TFT screen, we have the rest of our DAW controls, as well as DAW automation controls. This section here allows me to select what our D-pot section above the fader shows. It can show pans, channels, or sends. It also allows me to select what inputs or outputs are assigned to the channels. Here I'm assigning an input or an output. Familiar workstation controls are also in this section. You can choose to mute either a channel or a send, and also whether the send is pre or post fader. And it also allows you to bypass the send. You can select to bank your DAW channels And you can either do it in banks of 8 or in banks of 24 if you have 24 channels active, or one channel at a time. Beside the channel banking switch, we have the DAW focus switch. When the switch is illuminated, you're in analog mode, so the faders are controlling the analog path, unless you have your faders flipped, which would mean you're controlling your DAW faders via the Duality's faders. And the meters show the analog signal, whether that's the input or the monitor return. Pressing the focus button again changes to DAW mode. The meters in the meter bridge change from blue to green. This mode is allowing you to control either your Pro Tools, Logic, or any DAW using the Duality's faders, unless you flip them to the D pots.
Now, quite a cool function that a lot of consoles have these days is the DAW focus mode. Now, what this means is that we can press this little blue button here, and we now are using the console faders to control what's going on inside of our DAW. Now, in this case, I'm using the console to control my, my guitars here. And so if you're watching inside of the DAW, you'll see the fader move as I move my hand on the console, and so on and so forth. And so I can make a mix depending on how much level I want of my rhythm guitars, my lead guitars, or my acoustic. And it's quite cool. It means that the channels that are grouped inside of Pro Tools will now be grouped on the console as well, as you can see. So when I push these three, they push up together. And then my acoustic, I can pull it up like this, and we can mix our guitars. It just means that you can get a nice hands-on approach to the mix rather than clicking inside of a computer screen one at a time. You can really get involved, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable.
You also have typical keyboard functions which are crucial for shortcuts. For example, Shift, Control, Alt, and Option. Undo, Save, Escape, and Enter. The Alt option allows me to open or close a plugin interface. The Transport button opens a transport window. You also have memory locations and markers, and within Pro Tools, your Mix window and Edit window. The Status switch shows your session info within Pro Tools. You also have expanded transport controls for your workstation, like Return to Zero, Audition, Pre, and your in and out points. This is for your loop selection, as well as a punch mode and online mode for syncing. Over here you can select whether you're using DAW1 or DAW2. As I mentioned, you can select 2 different DAWs to control from the desk. When the light is on, that's DAW2, and when the light's off, that's DAW1. Above the stereo return section and below the meter bridge is a track bus master section, and this is basically where you have master level control for your 24 track buses. You can also choose to listen to the AFL signal for each of those track buses. The green pots are the aux bus masters, with the stereo Q masters at the top. They also have an AFL option. You also have masters for your 4 effects, and they have AFLs too. At the very top of the center section we have the meter bridge. On the left is a TFT screen, and on the right 3 VU meters. 1 for phase, and 2 for the left and right channels. The VU meters can either show your monitor source, stereo mix, mix A, and also anytime something's soloed it switches to show the solo bus. On the TFT screen, it shows all 3 main mix buses, and that's mix bus A, mix bus B, and mix bus C. It also shows you if anything's routed to the solo bus, and you will see the solo meters active. If anything's routed to QA, it shows you on the meters, and that also goes for QB, as well as the 4 effect sends. You also get feedback on any bus routing that's active on the desk. If I randomly select and activate buses, you will see this activity show up on the meters in the center section. The last section we'll look at in our center section is the legendary G-bus compressor. This compressor is primarily used over the mix bus. Assigning the bus compressor is achieved on the center section's bus matrix. The bus compressor can affect the balance of instruments within a mix, so it's a good idea to insert the bus compressor as you start mixing, rather than putting it in at the end. The compressor gives you threshold control, makeup gain, attack control with a stepped attenuator, ratio with a stepped attenuator, and a release stepped attenuator. The in switch allows you to activate or deactivate the compressor.
Alright, so what we have here is the SSL compressor. Now, quite a famous compressor, and we're just going to have a play around with a few settings and show you how to be nice and subtle with it. So I'll just chuck that on. Now, as I pull around my threshold, you can see the needle on the VU meter coming up. And now the idea is with this mix, we're not wanting to over-compress it too much. We're just wanting to really even off the tops of those kicks and snares. So you'll see that whenever a kick or snare is hit, it might just make a little nudge there. And I've got this on about a 4:1 ratio setting. Fairly fast attack, and a fairly fast release as well, actually. Now, you can check your compression by just turning it on and off. And so you can hear how much signal is being compressed when I hit this button here. So that could even be a bit too much. We'll just pull this back around. There we are, so just being nice and subtle with it.
Along with Total Recall, another great feature of working on a console like this is automation. You mainly get automation in only the top-end analog desks, even though you do get automation within your DAW. The reason for this is it can be quite an expensive option for some of the cheaper consoles. This desk allows you to automate all the soft switches and the faders.
Alright, so the SSL Duality has some really cool automation features, and we're just going to take you through a few that you may find on other consoles as well. Alright, so the idea here is that we need to create a new mix, and so we'll just do that now. And what you need to do on the SSL is just tell it what we're going to be automating. So I've got here my faders, cuts, and a few effects levels, just so you can see reverbs coming into play. And the idea is that the SSL can automate anything that's digital. So the pan pots, unfortunately, are analog. So unless we had some digital panning pots in there, then we cannot actually automate those. Things like your faders, turning on of effects, turning on of Q sends, the turning on of inserts and EQs, they can all be automated. So what we're going to do is we'll just run the mix, and we do that by doing what SSL calls executing. So we'll just execute. As we run this, you can see that nothing is actually changing yet, and I'm just going to skip to the end of the mix so that we can get a complete mix right, sort of like write mode inside of Pro Tools. And so now that's at the end of the mix, and we're about to finish writing. We'll just let the song go through. And this basically tells all our faders, our effects sends, Qs, EQs, inserts, and our cuts, where they should be sitting at the start of the mix. Alright, so that's done that. And now what we can do is have a look at what to automate. So just select our mix. Alright, so what we can do now is we can play around with a few of the faders, and I'm just going to pull down my drum compression. Now you'll hear the drum compression coming off, you'll probably hear the drums just getting a lot quieter. And we'll pull that back up. Right now I've just really got the console in a bit of a latch mode, and we can play around with groups as well, so I can pull out all my guitars if I wish. Say we wanted to get a bit of balance on the guitars in this part of the song. We've got our pianos. And if I was to stop the mix and listen back to it, then you'll be able to see the faders coming down, you'll be able to hear. There we go. And so the built-in computer on the SSL just remembers the fader movements and positioning, and you've got to keep in mind that this isn't actually adjusting any levels inside of your DAW such as Pro Tools, but it's only desk automation. There we go. Alright, so now we can automate some effects as well. And I've got a Bricast EM7 hooked up on Effects 4. And so you'll see here when I turn this on, you get some effects coming through there. I'll just mute all these other instruments. So you can hear the Bricast on there. We'll turn that off. And back on. Pretty cheesy demonstration for you. Now, so if we listen back to that, we should have all instruments going at the moment, and you'll hear the automation on the cuts that I did on the groups down here. There we go. And so you can hear the Bricast on at the moment, and that's automated off and back on. So it's very similar to automating inside of Pro Tools. Great. That's automation.
I now take you on a tour of the Mackie 1604 VLZ Pro. My aim here is to show you how a basic understanding of signal flow can help you move from a large format analog console like the SSL Duality to a small format analog console like this Mackie. Not everyone can afford a large format analog console, so the Mackie is a typical console you find in most project studios. Similar to the SSL, at the very top of the Mackie you have the mic pre's, labeled trim. This gives you gain adjustment for your line inputs and your mic pre's on the same pot. If you require phantom power, the phantom power switch can be found on the back of the console, and you can see the phantom power LED light up. Below the mic and line trim we have our auxiliary section. This particular mixer gives you a choice of 6 auxiliary outputs: aux 1, aux 2, aux 3, and aux 4. Auxes 5 and 6 are accessed by pushing in the 5 to 6 shift. The 5/6 shift button changes auxiliary pots 3 and 4 to control auxiliary outputs 5 and 6, giving you 2 additional auxiliaries even though you only have 4 pots on the front of the console. You also have a pre button. This routes all your auxiliaries, pre-EQ and filter section. Next we have the EQ. In our Mackie EQ section, we have a basic 3-band EQ with a sweepable mid. On the top, you have a fixed 12K high-frequency shelf, followed by your sweepable mids, ranging from 100 Hz to 8 kHz, with a gain pot. Below that, you have your low-frequency booster cut, with a fixed frequency of 80 Hz. Last in our EQ section is a low cut switch. This cuts your low frequencies at 75 Hz, with an 18 dB per octave filter. Below the EQ we have our pan section. Very simple left and right pan, followed by a mute switch. The overload light also shows mutes, or if your channel is actually overloading. Below that you have the signal LED. As you can see, with no signal coming into the mixer, the green LED is not active. As I push the signal up, the LED shows me there's a signal coming through on these 2 channels, but with nothing coming through over here. Next in our fader section is the solo button. This simply allows you to isolate that channel and hear what's going on. Soloing mutes all the other channels on the console. Below the solos you have the group bus buttons, or the sub outputs. Sub outputs 1 and 2, or 3 and 4. This is a simple busing system allowing you to send a signal to the sub outputs. On this particular mixer, this will be the best way to get a signal into your DAW. In the master section, you have your sub output master faders, and these can be used to control the recording level going to your DAW. The last button in our channel fader area is a left and right assign button. These allow you to assign your channels to the master bus. Starting at the very bottom of the master section, we have our sub-out masters. These are the master fader controls for your sub-outputs. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, and 4. coinciding with 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. These are found on each of our channels. To send a signal to your DAW, as I mentioned earlier, you'd simply activate your bus assignments and use this fader to control the level going into the DAW. If you simply wanted to use this as a way of grouping multiple channels together, you can assign as many channels as you wish to sub-outputs 1 and 2, for example. Make sure those channels are not being sent to your left and right mix bus, but send the group channels themselves to the main mix bus. And this allows you control of multiple channels on group faders. When using your sub-outs to assign levels to your DAW, it's important not to have your assign to main mix bus buttons down. This is important so you're not listening to your sub-outputs and the return from your DAW at the same time. You're only listening to the one source, preferably the return from the DAW. Beside the sub-outputs, we have our master fader. Just like on the SSL, this controls the level of our main mix bus. This is the main level coming out your main left and right. So this console has 4 group buses and 1 main mix bus, unlike the SSL, which has 3 mix buses and 24 track buses. Also in this area, we have our headphone output. The headphone output on this console mirrors the same signal being sent to the control room section. Just like on the SSL, we have our general center section master controls. So from the control room section, I can choose what our control room section actually listens to, and that's shown here by the meter. So I can choose to listen to the main mix, to listen to the sub-outputs, or to listen to the tape return input. The tape return input is a simple stereo input on the back of the console. You have a solo level control with a choice of AFL or PFL. If I solo a track, you'll see the solo light indicate that something is soloed. Above that, you have the input level for the tape input, and you can choose to assign the tape input to the main mix bus. And finally, the control room or headphone level control. Next, we have our stereo aux returns and aux masters. These are the masters for auxes 1 and 2, and they also have a solo function. And then we have the 4 auxiliary returns coming from our effects units, or can be used as additional stereo auxiliary inputs.